everything has woken up, because that's always the most important. You got to make sure everything wakes up. You got to make sure everything is copacetic. You got to make sure there's no curveballs. You got to make sure none of them are there. All right. And I think YouTube has given us permission to exist on the internet another day. But you guys know me. I'm a skeptic. I'm a tech skeptic, if that's such a thing. And I always wait until I see it, and I just did. What's up, everybody? Good afternoon, good morning, good day, good evening. Whatever it is where you're at. Maybe you're in Australia. It's the future. How's the future going? We made it another day. I'm thrilled to see that. Welcome to Get Your News On with Rob. We're back. We took a break. I was off the grid for a little bit. Some people were giving me a hard time about that. They were like, Ron, it's not off the grid if you're still making videos and tweeting. Touche. It was as off the grid as I want to be, basically. I was off the grid, sort of. The internet was slower. I was occasionally making some short videos, which you guys have been giving me some positive feedback on. I appreciate that. The most recent one was on capitalism, where in 2 minutes, or approximately 2 minutes, I talk about something. We did one on capitalism. We did one on ranked choice voting. We did one on my predictions for the first debate, which, by the way, might not happen. We're going to talk about that in a minute. First, the people who make this show possible, ZT.com, ZHITEA.com. Their tea kind of rules, and you can get it wholesale. It's a wonderful tea company run by a friend of the show and a good lefty, Jeffrey. You need some tea right now. You should be drinking your hot beverages. They got great greens. They got great black teas. They got great fusions. Like they do a raspberry pecan thing. It's totally awesome. Go to ZT.com. Check out some of those teas. Again, that's ZHITEA.com. Triage Oil. They make pain oil that you rub on your body, and they do a phenomenal job at it. TriageOil.com. If you're looking for some pain oil, I do it for my neck. I do it also, by the way, helps for a sunburn. Helps for cuts and a sunburn. I found that out recently. I know you're thinking, Ron, you get sunburned? I know, crazy, but it does happen to me. TriageOil.com. And finally, if maybe you're thinking, Ron, what about the type of CBD oil that I can digest, that I can put in my body, that I can drink? Got you covered. RareNaturalsCBD.com. That's with an S. RareNaturalsCBD.com. You can get some really solid, all-natural CBD oil. I like to drink it right after a workout or to help me with a headache. And it works really well. You can go to that website and you can use the promo code Lucy at checkout. Don't forget to use the promo code Lucy, Lucy, and you get 30% off your order. If you like CBD oil, if it's something you like to use, hell of a deal. 30% off. How can you beat it? RareNaturalCBD.com. Use the promo code Lucy. All right, without further ado, I am so stoked for my guest today. I've been wanting to talk to her for a while, and I finally got her on the show. She is an author. She is a writer. She's an activist. She is a senior contributor at the Black Agenda Report, and her book is called Prejudential, which we're going to be talking about that some. Please welcome to the show, Margaret Kimberley. Margaret, how are you?
Good. I just put the book in front of my face. I'm good. Thank you so much. It's great to meet you at last.
Yeah, likewise. I'm so excited to talk to you. I've been following you on the social medias for a while, and we're gonna get our news on. And then I got a lot of questions for you. So this is gonna be a fun time. So let's go here first. This was all over the blogosphere over the weekend. Supporters are urging Joe Biden not to debate Donald Trump. Here's my favorite quote from this. This is right underneath the picture here. Biden, now this is something a supporter said. Biden shouldn't feel obligated to throw Trump a lifeline by granting him any debates at all. That's a real quote, Margaret. That's a quote. Yeah. They're acknowledging that not only are they scared for Joe Biden to debate Donald Trump, but they're saying if he does, he's doing Trump a favor. They don't see a problem.
You know, there has been lately, another thing I'll mention briefly, a lot of propaganda meant to try to pull Biden over the finish line. You keep reading, Trump's going to quit. Trump should quit. This or that Republican doesn't really like him. I don't see Trump quitting. It's not in his personality to do that. Even if he should lose, he would go down in flames before he would leave. So the other problem with Biden, the problem is Biden himself. That's why I'm skeptical of these polls that show him so far ahead of Trump. He's going to win in a landslide. No, if he wins, it won't be a landslide. There's something wrong with him. I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, he's not well. He's not a healthy man. I'm a lay person. I can't say what it is, but he isn't well. He has some cognitive problem. He doesn't know where he is, confuses his wife with his sister, says something crazy every time they allow him to be in front of a camera. So now we're going to hear he doesn't have to debate because that could help Trump. This is the beginning. This is the opening salvo of trying to rescue him by keeping him from being in a debate. I think COVID has helped him. You can't have, or you should not have large rallies at this point. So all of the pressing of the flesh that candidates usually would do just a few months before Election Day, he can't do. They've hidden him in his basement. When he is on camera, it's some sort of catastrophe. So I'm not at all surprised to see this. And I would not be. Now, it's interesting. Trump may demand a debate. What do you do then? But they are acknowledging that this man, they foisted upon us. They deep sixed Bernie Sanders' campaign. They chose him, and they can't trust him to be on camera.
I think that it goes, I mean, I think I agree with everything you said. And I think because of the pandemic, that's the only reason there's even like a conversation at this point. Mm-hmm. I mean, before everything got as nuts as it's gotten with this pandemic, I said, there's no way in hell Biden has any chance. I even refuse to use the words Biden winning, because if Biden does become president, Biden didn't win. Donald Trump just beat Donald Trump. This is not a contest. This is Donald Trump going up against himself. And he's actually right now kind of beating himself. Although, again, I've said this too. I think this is the first presidential election in my lifetime where I'm actually not sure either candidate wants to win. I actually think
Trump didn't want to win the first time.
Right?
Lest we forget, he hoped to come in second and somebody else would be the nominee. He wasn't planning to get the nomination and then didn't think he was going to defeat Hillary Clinton. So this is the second time he doesn't want to win. I mean, Biden, it's hard to say if he knows, and I'm not trying to just disparage him and make fun, but I don't know if he knows what's going on at times. So I think you have a good point there. It's hard to say what they want, but Trump has a huge ego. On the other hand, if he had good sense, he would not be running for re-election. But I think he hates to be defeated. And whenever he's asked about his legacy, all he does is talk about Russiagate being a hoax, which it was. It was a fraud. But so no, he's like the accidental president and president during a pandemic. So I wouldn't be surprised if his heart isn't in it. But if anybody could still lose to him, it's Joe Biden.
Accidental President needs to be a book someday. I don't even know if it's going to be about Donald Trump. It just has to be a book, period.
It has to be him. He's the guy. I mean, the other accidental presidents were, the guy before them died in office or something. But he ran for a job he didn't think he was going to get.
He wanted to start a network.
Yes. Yeah. He hoped to do well in the primaries, and he would leverage that to start a television network. That was his big goal, but he ended up winning. And we are stuck with this person thanks to the Democratic Party. The Democrats are entirely to blame for him squeaking through in the Electoral College. I don't see any evidence that they're protecting the vote the way they ought to. Republicans always win by stealing Black people's votes, and I don't see any action on cross-check or the voting machines, or even if there's a lot of mail-in voting, the spoiled ballots, the Black voters have their votes thrown out more often. and not to mention problems with turnout. I just don't see it. I can imagine him winning again. It's not out of the question.
I feel the same way. And we recently just had Greg Palast on this show, and I read his most recent book, and it's like, look, the numbers are there. And some of my, some of my more, centrist friends and stuff, I'm like, look, you want to talk about election integrity and what could happen again. You don't need to look at some meme that maybe came from Russia. You need to look at what's going on in our own country and the roles that they are purging. And it happens time and time again. And it's about to happen again. And I'm with you. Again, originally I said there's no chance. I mean, Donald Trump is going to get reelected. Biden, there's no way in hell, because when you give people nothing to vote for and only something to vote against, it doesn't frickin' work. It just doesn't work. Because of this pandemic, and we are in such unprecedented times, I do think there is a chance now that Donald Trump could beat Donald Trump.
Yes.
But that is not guaranteed.
No.
And yeah, these people, they're talking landslide, they're talking this, and it's like, does your memory not go back 4 years?
Well, they know this is BS, and they know they're doing it. This is a propaganda campaign. It's going to be a landslide. Trump can't possibly win. You mentioned Greg Palast. Every 4 years, he writes a book about how elections are stolen in this country, and every 4 years, nothing changes. I think 4 years later, people still have not accepted that he won. His election was such a trauma, I think, and it has not helped that instead of talking about how he won, we've heard about the Russians. We've heard about everything except the fact that more than 60 million people looked at him and said, yeah, I'll vote for him. And I don't see any reason to believe that those people are going to vote for Joe Biden. I think there may be a lower turnout, but Biden is not talking about. It's a completely negative campaign. There's a website, Settle for Biden. This is supposed to be helping him.
I know. At first, when I saw that, Margaret, I got bummed out. And the reason I got bummed out is because whenever a new satire website comes up and they don't invite me to be a contributor, it hurts my feelings. And then I found out that's not
These are people who actually trying to get him to win.
I was like, they didn't email me. That bumps me out. I could have come up with some stuff for this. And I was like, oh, wait, no, they're for real. They're serious.
For real. And so we have, I try to challenge people, and people get so defensive because they don't want to think about Trump winning again. I say, look, without talking about Supreme Court, without mentioning Donald Trump by name, what's the reason for people who are sitting on the fence or not motivated to vote? Why should they vote for Joe Biden? And nobody can ever answer the question. It boils down to, we've got to get rid of Trump. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is in and out of the hospital, and and that's it. That's all. Nobody has an affirmative reason to vote for him. They haven't. Just pick one thing for him to run on that people need. But this is the problem. The Democratic Party donor class does not want him to talk about any of the things that would actually help him win. So Medicare for all, that's out. Raising the minimum wage, that's out. Free public college, they say he supports it, but he's not really saying what they do. So people are still going broke because they get sick. Now we have millions of people out of work. No talk of a jobs program, no talk of any of the things that would get people out to vote. There are millions of people who are not motivated voters, and I don't shame them anymore. I don't criticize them anymore. Nobody gives them a reason to vote. And that's still true now. And this idea that just talking about Trump will get people motivated to vote for Biden is false. So people better strap themselves in, and people saying, we can't survive Trump, we can't. I said, well, we survived the past 3.5 years. We'll survive, but he can still win.
Oh, absolutely. And getting back to this specifically regarding the debates. Now, and this goes beyond, first of all, if anyone's like, well, COVID, like, no, we can have a virtual debate. Okay.
Yeah,
Like we can have a virtual
they
debate.
can be
Well,
only two guys on a stage,
yeah.
20
Yeah.
feet apart or something. I mean, come on.
Or they can do it, they can do a stream where Biden will probably not look at the camera half the time, but whatever, they can do that. Like it's very
Yes, there are ways to
plausible.
do this.
Yeah, there are ways to do this. So putting that aside, and they're saying, well, don't debate. And they're using all these like, well, Trump just lies so much. Like, oh yeah, he's the first politician who has ever lied. That's never happened before until Donald Trump showed up. That's never been a thing.
Yeah.
But also, here's the other thing. Donald Trump has completely, I mean, calling this pandemic mishandled is an understatement. There's not a word in the English language to describe how this administration, which Donald Trump is on top of, has handled all of this. There's not a word for it. It's been beyond a disaster.
Right.
However, there are people who, when they're picking a president, they still respond to strength. And let me ask you this, because my answer is I don't know of anything that exists like this. Have you ever heard of a story or a movie or a book or anything in the world, Margaret, where the hero doesn't confront the bully?
No, that's every fairy tale, Harry Potter. I mean, you name it. You've got to face the villain. If Biden loses and Democrats don't rise up and grab their pitchforks and march on the DNC, then I really fear for this country. This is disgraceful. And with COVID, but there's something else going on with COVID. There are a lot. First of all, let's not forget there are more than 60 million people who voted for him in the first place. There are people who still say it's a hoax. There are people who say it's a plot. People talk about, what's his name? Bill Gates is the villain, or they're anti-vax, or don't tread on me, or any number of things, who are not going to blame Trump. And there's something else, too, that I should say. There are people who like him, and nobody wants to admit it. There are people who find him appealing. The things that I find grotesque and you find grotesque, when he marched out of the White House and tear-gassed people to hold up a Bible upside down outside of a church, there are people who eat that up. And in fact, I think Trump's only political skill is that he knows his people and he knows what they like. And they did not stop liking him. There are people who like the racism. They like the kids in cages. They like everything he does. And the fact that people brought guns to force the country to reopen so that the virus could spread, I don't know what else to tell people. I still think there's a lot of denial about the fact that he has an appeal. And I also think people lie about supporting him. I think you have to give him.
It happened the first time.
Yes.
It happened the first time.
You've got to give him 5 extra percentage points for many.
I agree.
Whatever it's supposed to be. And people forget, did we forget about the Electoral College? What are the polls showing in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin? What are those polls showing? How do you measure who is or isn't going out? I can't believe these polls. I mean, they could be right. Biden could win, but I'm not depending on them. I'm not hanging my hat on any of that.
I think it's 50-50 right now. I really do. I think it's 50-50. And the other thing, you mentioned the one things Trump's good at in regards to his base. The other thing I will say that Trump knows how to do is he really knows how to play the news cycles big time. Here's what happened a couple days ago. Donald Trump was talking real big about a stimulus that he knew was not going to happen, and it was going to come off making him look incredibly weak when Republicans weren't going to do anything that he suggested. It was going to make him look terrible. Another thing that happened, he didn't attend John Lewis's funeral. Another thing that happened, Herman Cain died shortly after attending the Tulsa rally. So what does Trump do? He goes on Twitter and he says, maybe we should delay the election. And what is the only thing anybody talks about that day? Donald Trump is suggesting delaying the election. He can't do that. He's scared. Resistance. And it worked out again for him. Dodged all those other bullets for this just rhetorical game.
Sure. And I and this is the thing that annoys me. Well, there's so many reasons to be annoyed with the corporate media. But instead of explaining to us how Election Day is established and telling us that it isn't going to happen, they repeat it as if it's something that's real. Excuse me. Trump says we can delay the election. No, he can't. Congress has to change Election Day, and that's not going to happen. He can't stay in office if he loses. January 20th, somebody else is president, even if he locks himself in the basement. So no, he can't do these things. But instead of informing people, instead of giving us the civics class that we need, they feed into him because he's good copy, which helped him win the first time.
Oh, big time.
They get ratings, they get clicks when he says something crazy. And yes, he does know how to use the news cycle. He does plan when to make these statements. He's such a polarizing figure, and he knows it, and he is on purpose. So he knows when to drop these little rhetorical, these little rhetorical bombs and get attention and deflect attention away from what people ought to be paying attention to. And the same media who will repeat that he, says he can delay the election, they never talk about what we just talked about vote theft, about how elections, they never talk about that. But they will let him hold court and talk about something that isn't going to happen.
Mm-hmm. So let's go here. So this is right now what's going on. We still have not gotten another, quote, stimulus package. I put stimulus in quotes because really it's a stimulus for the banks, and they kind of throw us peanuts. But we still don't have that. They let the federal benefits expire. And by the way, this was a bipartisan effort. Yes, but here's what they're working on, though. Here's something that they can kind of really get on top of right away when they want to, especially when SCOTUS is involved. SCOTUS rules Trump can move forward with border wall construction. This is breaking. It just happened today. In a 5-4 ruling, this is from Democracy Now!, the Supreme Court said on Friday, President Trump can move ahead with building his U.S.-Mexico border wall using $2.5 billion in military funds to construct a border wall that most of the country doesn't want, that we don't need. We have a net zero immigration. It is just a racist scapegoat. It's a racist, hateful scapegoat. It's a beyond tired talking point, and yet $2.5 billion.
And there was an effort to cut the military budget by 10%, was it? Which failed. Democrats joined Republicans in turning it down. So 10% of our obscenely expensive, defense spending takes up 60% of our budget. It is literally why we can't have nice things. And Democrats refused to say that we could cut a mere 10% of it. If you go to Washington, D.C., you see ads. I've seen them in the Washington Metro in their subway system. Who has ads in the subway system? Raytheon, McDonnell Douglas. It's like if you didn't know who ran the government, all you have to do is go to Washington and find out.
Yes.
And so he can go ahead with his border wall. Democrats don't fight him on anything. Nancy Pelosi can tear up his speech, but he gets everything he wants. He wants a Space Force. He gets it. He doesn't want to cut. They give him sometimes more than what he asks for. They
gave him more in the one military budget than what he asked for.
Yes.
They gave him billions more. It was like I forget the exact number, but yeah, it was billions more than what he asked for.
Right. There's no difference in foreign policy. None. All they do is try to outdo one another, talking about who's going to be tougher with China. So what do we get? I mean, these stimulus bills there's going to be something before November. they're going to find a way to get together. So we're going to get another check before November. I believe. I think that's what's going to happen.
Well, let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
If we actually, and I think it's a long shot at this point, but if we do get an actual proper emergency UBI, like monthly reoccurring payments for all Americans, do you think that's going to definitely guarantee a Trump win? Because I think it will.
Oh, sure, because it's as I just said, it's already closer than they're telling us it is. And there are people who maybe, I don't know if I still like him, give him some money. And yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm expecting something unexpectedly generous between now and October. They are going to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. So here's something interesting going on, the border wall, that they got the money for that. That's a big priority. And here's something very fascinating that we've been having this conversation all over the weekend. The U.S. Postal Service gets $10 billion, a coronavirus relief loan, which is good, after months of negotiations and attacks by Trump. So here's the interesting connection here. When it comes to the border wall, nobody asked the question, how are you going to pay for it? Nobody asked the question, how is it going to make money? How is it going to be profitable? But the Postal Service, Donald Trump, time and time again, they finally got something, but they're under constant attack because they're not, quote unquote, according to Donald Trump, profitable. Guess what? They're not called the postal business.
No,
they're called the Postal Service. The word service is in the name. It's right there. It's Postal Service. What does that mean? That means they don't have to be profitable. That means what their job is to provide an essential service to the American people at an affordable price, which they do. And the people doing this essential service are getting paid a salary to do so. And they're citizens of the country who then use that salary in the economy. That's how a service works. It's unbelievable we even have these conversations. It's unreal.
Well, one of the problems with the Postal Service finances is that the Republicans have been trying to kill it. They passed, I think it was when Bush was president, the Postal Service has to pay for all its pension costs. It has to pay up front. Nobody else, no other business, no other government agency is required to do this. They did this to kill it. And it's one of the things, if you're going to be mad at Obama and the Democrats, that they could have easily handled his first 2 years when he controlled Congress. They would have had the people behind them. It would have been very easy to undo that legislation. So the Postal Service is surviving under the weight of this unnecessary debt. So if it's not profitable, that's why. And, everybody's had some problem with mail service, but for the most part, it's, what is it, 50 cents now? I can't remember. I got the forever stamp, so I don't even know what it costs.
I always get the forever too.
And but I can send a letter across town here in New York City, or I can send a letter to Hawaii or Alaska. It's still 50 cents. It usually arrives when they say. So come on, it's a target. It's a right-wing target to attack government services, to attack public employees, and also I think it's also racist. People know that many public employees are Black, so it's seen as a Black person's job. So that's another way to attack it. So we have this necessary service that everybody needs, that everybody wants, that is a bargain by any definition, and they still want to kill it. But that's what happens when the Democrats, we have a far-right party and a center-right party. Yeah. And because we don't have a party that stands up for us, this is the kind of thing we get.
Yeah, and it's just, and I think it's really a reflection of the conditioning of the American people, and the media plays a role in this, and I mean, it all plays a role in this. I mean, especially with the pandemic, we have found out we are a capitalism death cult. That's essentially what we are in this country.
Yep.
And it's like, you're taught where it's just like, well, they're not profitable. And it's like, do you ask if your police force is profitable? Do you ask, like, where else? Do you ask if the military-industrial complex is profitable? Do you ask, like, why are you not asking? Which they are profitable for some people.
Yes.
But,
yes.
Not
in the way anybody that helps us.
Right.
But this is decades of propaganda. I mean, that's the word. It's just propaganda. And it has seeped into people's consciousness. Government is bad. It started with Reagan. Any government is bad. It's always bad. Small government is the best thing for you. And that's just not true, not by any stretch of the imagination, not by any measure. And that's why people so often fall prey to this. And even things that we want, and because then we don't have a political party that fights for us. We're the only, and we should stop calling ourselves an advanced country, by the way, but that's the category we're always put in. The only one that doesn't provide free healthcare for everybody. And so in the middle of a pandemic, you have those people who are lucky enough to have insurance. It's connected to your job. We've got how many millions unemployed now? What is it, 40 million people unemployed who obviously have lost their health insurance and can't even access their unemployment benefits. So we have this, as you said, a capitalism death cult, and people are so beaten down and so propagandized about doing for themselves, about the system working the way it should, about government being bad. And it seeps into people's consciousness. If you're not careful, it's kind of like music. You know how there's a song that was a hit when you were a kid, and then years later you find yourself singing along. You're like, how do I still remember those lyrics? That's what it's like when you're told time after time and there's no pushback, no other narrative allowed, the media going along with it. So that's where we are now. People either defend the things that are making their lives miserable, or they literally don't know how to fight back and don't know how to speak up for themselves.
With the music analogy, you're really preaching to the choir. I think the last thing that will go from my memory is either song lyrics or just really random facts about rock and roll and the Beatles that has served no purpose in my life necessarily, other than like a conversation when something comes on in the car where my wife has to pretend like she finds it interesting. Like that'll happen. We'll have like a Spotify station on, and I'm like, that this is actually how the distorted guitar happened. And the reason it happened was because they dropped the amplifier on the way to the studio and it sounds distorted. And then they were like, that's cool. And that's how, and she goes, okay. And that's.
Is that true, by the way? Or were you?
Yes. The song Rocket 88, you know that song?
I don't know.
Rocket 88. It's a classic. And I forget the first, it's been covered many, many times, and I forget actually the original artist, but when they went to record Rocket 88 on the way to the studio, the guitarist dropped their amplifier. And when they plugged it in, it was like kind of like it was, but they started playing it and they were like, this sounds really cool. And they liked it so much that later they invented pedals that could give you that sound. And that's how the distorted guitar happened. Yeah.
Interesting. I like that story.
Well, there you go. That'll probably be in my short term for another, however long, probably as long as I'm alive. That'll be,
Good story. But that's, but yeah, it is. But that's how. That's why Americans believe what they believe. Americans don't like to think of themselves as being propagandized, but we are very much so in school, by the media, by politicians, and we literally. Even the thing that I find most disturbing is that people who want to be informed are still not informed. So if you read the New York Times or the Washington Post or listen to NPR or watch MSNBC, you still don't know what you should know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you actually know the opposite of what you should know. And you go into, you mentioned recently like the defense companies and stuff like that. When you watch the corporate media, and you watch their commercials, you hear commercials by Raytheon and by oil and gas and by all these institutions. And here's the deal. They're not trying to get the word out. Everybody who has a car knows that if they don't put gasoline in it, it doesn't go. Everyone knows that. Nobody needs to see a commercial like, shit, it's been sitting in the driveway for months. I didn't know why. Nobody needs to see that commercial. Right. Similarly, nobody is in the market to buy a tank anytime soon. Right. I guess except for police department, but nobody else. So they're not trying to get the word out to you, the consumer. They're trying to buy favorable coverage, and they're trying to make sure that things that contradict their interests never get talked about. That's why you never hear an honest report about a social movement. That's why you never hear an honest report about the environment, about climate change. They sugarcoat it all. And by the way, this transitions into another story I wanted to share with you. Because MSNBC is owned by Comcast, you're never going to hear an honest story about net neutrality. You're never going to hear an honest story about the internet. And here's a headline from Socialist Alternative. And this is so true. COVID-19 crisis really shows that the internet should be a public utility. Now, I saw this first. I got to give a shout out on my friend Jamie's Facebook. I saw it. And this is where I first saw this article. And I don't know if you know this about me, Margaret. I'm a big proponent for municipal broadband internet.
Yes, I knew that. Yes.
Okay. So that's a big thing to me. And for anyone not to know, that's just basically city-owned internet, where the internet is a public utility in your life, the same way your garbage collection is handled or something like that. The internet is treated the same way the city maintains it. This has already happened in the United States, by the way. There's a lot of cities that already have this. Every city that has this, it is better than the internet that big cable offers you, and it is more affordable. Why is that? Well, because the big cable companies formed an organized duopoly back in the day, and their only concern is profit. So there are still underserved areas for internet in this country, and it's because they don't think there's going to be enough money for them to build there, so they don't. And here's something else that's happening connected to this. Back in November, this is from Free Press, back in November, you had a situation where they weren't providing broadband to schools. So what happens is there's still underserved areas. There's still a lot of students in this country, kids in this country, whose families, they don't have access to decent broadband. So one of the things they can do is they'll have residence hotspots. Sometimes it's in a school parking lot. Sometimes it's in a library parking lot. So in May, Philly School District begged Comcast to open the resident hotspot so students could get online. Comcast refused. And what Free Press is pushing for is that this fall, with schools being virtual, at least until November, we need these kids to get online. They need to be online. And Comcast is probably going to refuse again. And how sad and scary is it that we have to rely on Comcast, which wins awards, literally wins awards for being the worst company in the frickin' world. Literally. And we're relying on them for our students' education. And that's the weird thing that's going on here, because now more than ever, more people are waking up to the fact the internet is a public utility in our lives. It needs to be treated as such. We need to have municipal broadband all over the country where the city controls internet infrastructure for the citizens. And, but here's the deal. Amidst the pandemic, it's really hard to raise that issue at your city council, with your city hall, because, gee, we're amidst a pandemic and you want to propose this multi-million-dollar project right now.
Well, this is a perfect time. Who is not depending on the internet now?
Right.
I had a problem with my, I won't even speak their name. I can't stand them. My cable.
The Voldemort of your life.
It was horrible. I had to complain. I finally got the service that I needed, but the whole time this was going on, I said, why do we need cable companies to give us internet? Why do we have this system? And our lousy cable company here, somebody merged with somebody else and created a third worst company to allegedly serve us. And we don't need them. We There is no reason why they are the people who give us internet. There's no reason for that at all, except that they, capitalism. That's the reason. And also, if we're going to talk about internet, these platforms should be regulated as public utilities. Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, all of them, they should be public utilities. It's unconscionable that Facebook decides who is and isn't heard, that Israel can say Palestinian groups get kicked off. Or if somebody, I say as far as COVID's concerned, let everybody talk. Let everybody talk. If somebody's a quack, I'll figure it out for myself. You don't have to ban them. The Atlantic Council, which is NATO, deciding what foreign policy Facebook deems acceptable. And this, of course, is the fault of Democrats trying to score points about with Russiagate that have asked for this censorship that we have on Twitter, that we have on Facebook, that these people who decide that you get kicked off temporarily or permanently, that needs to be regulated. They should not. We depend on these platforms. You can't live without them for entertainment, for news, for everything, to buy stuff. We have to have these platforms. They've become a necessity. And for them to be able to operate in the way that they do without any sort of regulatory oversight is terrible.
Well, does it blow your mind? Because I agree with you 110%. Does it blow your mind how many people miss the mark on that issue?
It does. And I'll tell you one of the things they do that was very shrewd. First, they attack people that nobody likes. So Alex Jones, well, we got to get Alex Jones. He's the psycho. He's a racist. He's a fascist. He's this, he's that. I personally don't care if Alex Jones has a platform. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. It bothers me that I can't get the platform that he has. So they start by attacking someone who's outside of the realm of acceptability. And people just go along. Well, of course, it's take Alex Jones off. I'm like, let Alex Jones stay, but let me stay. But stop censoring everybody. That is my argument. And I think that's how, that was one of the results of Russiagate. This evil country had given us Donald Trump, and they did it with Facebook memes. So we had the Democrats are behind it. The Senator Warner, who ran to Facebook's headquarters several times in order to bully them and threaten them with God knows what, to start this censorship. I think Facebook, they knew better than anybody that these were clickbait schemes.
They knew it was like $1,400 in Google ads.
Yes.
$1,400.
$1,400 in Google ads. I think it was like $50,000 in Facebook ads, and most of those came after Election Day. I mean, it's just absurd. And one of the Russian-based companies that Mueller indicted, they responded. They ended up throwing the case out of court. So, but that's how it's been done. They use liberals. They are the ones, frankly, to blame for so much of this censorship. Yeah, and it's very, very dangerous, and it's very sad.
Well, how do you not? I mean, it's just, I don't understand how so many people just haven't connected those very obvious dots where it's like, look, a Silicon Valley person shouldn't decide what is or isn't real news and what you should or shouldn't see. It just makes zero sense. When you're reading the news as a consumer, do you go, I don't know if this is real news or not. I better call the Geek Squad. Nobody does that. It makes zero sense. Where's the connection there? Yet that's basically what they're calling for. What should happen is these things should be public utilities, and there should be some constitutional lawyers involved. Because look, and I will say this, I think that the free speech laws in the United States are pretty darn good. Are they perfect? Of course not. There is no such thing as perfection in this area. It's not possible. But I think the free speech laws in the United States are pretty darn good. It's better than what I would come up with on my own, I bet. So, You have people that specialize in those issues, and they make sure that if you're not violating the free speech laws of this country, you're not censored.
Basically, that's that. Let's just go along with that. That's it. That's all. Let everybody talk. And if somebody offends me, I don't have to read them. I don't have to watch them. But if there's somebody I do want to watch, I should be able to decide that for myself and not have Trump say that I can't have TikTok because the Chinese Communist Party will have my data.
Isn't that beautiful?
It's horrible. And,
Isn't that?
The NSA has all of our data, but never mind. And these platforms I'm talking about turn over information to the government all the time. But this is how, and liberals have to be a little more humble and admit that they like to point fingers at the right wing for being stupid, but their liberals have their own failings too, and they love technology, so they worship these companies like they're gods, and it needs to stop. It really does need to stop, and this is why we need real democracy, small d democracy, where we decide who gives us internet access. And we decide what the police do in our communities. And we decide what kind of health care we can have. All of these things that are so important in our lives are taken, the power to do anything about them has just been taken away from us. And then you don't have a democracy. I don't care if they let you vote. I don't care if there are elections. If you can't control the things that have power over your life, then you don't have a democracy. You just don't.
Well, wasn't the TikTok thing so interesting? Because first of all, I always found it mildly comical whenever somebody would be warning about TikTok on Twitter and Facebook. And also, isn't it interesting?
I know.
Chuck Schumer, the only time Chuck Schumer will stand up to a corporation is when they're making an app that Donald Trump doesn't like, or they're behind an app that Donald Trump doesn't like. Isn't that beyond fascinating?
It is. It shows you they don't have issues with each other. When it comes down to the people with money, they're all on the same team. And I actually think the Democrats can live with Trump. They use him as a foil. They use him to shut people up. They use him to get people to give them money. But at the end of the day, they're on the same team. This TikTok thing is a joke. They have used this phobia against China to basically steal this Chinese corporation and give it to an American corporation so they can operate here in the United States. That's all. And everybody's in favor of it. No one says no. No one speaks up. We see they're all on the same team. When it comes to money for U.S. corporations, they're all friends.
Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about you now. And I'm excited to talk to you about you and not the news. So okay. I had a few questions for you. Cornel West speaks very, very highly of you. Yes. And one of the things that he said about you was that you are one of the people who you kept your integrity. And I'm paraphrasing, but he said you kept your integrity through the Obama years. What did he mean by that? And what does that mean to you?
Well, he's very generous, man. And gave me a blurb for my book, which is great. But what he was referring to was this exhortation to not just to vote blue no matter who, not just to support the Democrats and shut up about it, but Obama, first Black president. Don't you want the Republicans out? You can't question him. Look at the right wing. They're already always attacking him. You can't say anything. Obamacare. If you even asked the question, you wouldn't have Obamacare and a plan that lets you buy insurance that's too expensive. So people were supposed to shut up when he destroyed Libya or bailed out the banks or did any of the other things that we're just talking about that Democrats and Republicans can agree on. So I appreciate his praise of me, but it still happens. It's like a cult of, Michelle Obama had a podcast and people are still talking. And I was like, oh my God, will this ever end? But it won't. He's too useful. Bush, as we may recall, was unpopular. And the rulers they had to have a Democrat in office. And they had to have somebody who could market himself as a change agent without really changing anything, while still doing all the things that they want a president and the Congress to do. So it was tough, and I'm sure you've experienced it too. To criticize Obama, to even ask a question about him is forbidden still. But I can't do anything else. I couldn't change my religion, so to speak, because he was president, and that's one of the things we're very proud of at Black Agenda Report.
So in your book, which I have not read yet, I need to read it, Prejudential, you explore, the history of the presidents and how they relate to Black America. And one of the questions you pose, some of the presidents that are deemed by society more sympathetic to Black America, the examples you gave was Bill Clinton and Abraham Lincoln. You asked the question, well, were they actually? So what's some of the stuff that you found when you wrote that book?
Talk about propaganda. I found that Abraham Lincoln was not the great emancipator. His major goal was to to try to send Black people out of the country. The Democrats until the 60s were the party of the segregated South. So FDR, when he was ever asked to do anything to fight discrimination, to fight Jim Crow, would always say, well, I would love to help you, but I need those votes from Southerners. That Bill Clinton was one of the most conservative presidents, the Sister Souljah moment. He tried it again at John Lewis's funeral, talking about Stokely Carmichael, which who the hell knew where that came from? The guy who he filled the prisons, who had a campaign event outside a prison in Georgia, putting Black men on display in prison garb. The man who gave us all this media consolidation. That's one of the reasons that we have this crappy cable service. There are only a handful of companies in the communications. There's 6 countries. Anything you see or hear in this country, you get from one of 6 countries. There used to be hundreds of radio stations. There were rules that you couldn't have a newspaper and TV station in the same city. He got rid of that.
Yes, he did. Telecommunications Act in 1996.
Right. And the discourse has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. And that is why certain voices can't be heard. So Clinton was terrible. I'm embarrassed to admit that I voted for him first both times, but I've long been over that. I don't vote for Democrats anymore in presidential elections. In fact, I'm a Green Party member. So, and Obama, he talk about a cynic. He knew that Black people, this idea of having a Black president was so powerful, he could get away with anything. And still scolding Black people, talking over our heads straight to white people, to talk about Black men not being responsible, or jokes about Cousin Pookie and Cousin Ray Ray, and if a Democrat loses, it's because of some Black man Cousin Pookie won't get off the couch. Another more bailouts of Wall Street, taking Bush's temporary, in quotes, tax cuts for the rich and making them permanent. So there aren't any presidents, frankly, who were friends of Black people. Those who did the right thing did so because they were pressured by mass movements, because the people forced them to do the right thing. And it says something larger about the kind of country we have and who's really in power and who gets what they want in this country. We've touched on it many times in this conversation. So it's the people who need to have we need to have power over our lives, and we need a real people's party, a real workers' party, a real environmental party, a real peace party. That's what we have to have. And it's not the Democrats, and you can't allow ourselves to be frightened into supporting people who stab us in the back time and time again.
So where do you go? And this actually transitions really nice, but this was one of the questions I wrote down that I really wanted to ask you. Where do you find hope these days? Like actual hope? Like how do you maintain an amount of optimism? If you do?
Well, conversely, I'm not rejoicing in anybody's suffering, but I am optimistic that it's clear that the system is coming apart, that the COVID pandemic has exposed that we don't have a real healthcare system. We don't have a political system that takes care of people's needs. We have a system that is built to create wars all over the world. The killing of George Floyd, I think the protests were so big, were all over the country, were so diverse. I mean, Portland doesn't even have any Black people, has very few Black people, and yet they have these huge demonstrations. People are angry about a lot of things, and that's something to be optimistic about. It's not something to try to diminish. It's not something to try to discourage. We get the most in this country when the people make coherent demands. We're still working through this in this new movement, but that actually gives me optimism that the system has lost legitimacy. That is a good thing. People talk about the American empire falling like that's a bad thing. No, that's a good thing. And It's a good thing that there's no legitimacy. But if there is not an active left, then you have a problem. And then you really have fascism, and not just an obnoxious man who tweets a lot. True fascism.
Do you think we need a general strike?
Yes, but we need people who are educated about such a thing, to know that there is such a thing as a general strike, to know that that is a possibility. And we're so propagandized about electoral politics, and you always see it in an election year. The only thing we're encouraged to do is vote. So just vote blue, just vote for Biden. Like he's going to take care of things that were problems before Trump became president. So we have to undo the propaganda, undo the miseducation that we've been under, and then we can do things like have a general strike and not feel obliged to vote for people whose interests are not ours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. People don't realize this. Like, no. Trump didn't cause all of this stuff to crumble. It was crumbling, and that's why we got Trump, and now it's continuing to crumble.
Yep. There's no legitimacy. We shouldn't try to give it any legitimacy. Let's call it what it is. Stop saying we live in a democracy. Stop saying we live in an advanced society where kids can't go to school, but corporations decide whether they can learn or not. No, it's time they can't stop putting lipstick on the pig. And that actually does give me some optimism.
I'm with you. Hey, and I can give you one more. I don't even call us a country. I say we are a corporation with state lines.
Pretty much, yes. And that's why there's no cohesion in this country. And that's why there are people who don't want to wear a face mask, because people don't feel any concern for anybody else because of this dog-eat-dog society that we live in. That creates a lot of craziness, quite frankly.
Yeah. I am with you. I'm with you 100%. So where can people go to learn more about you?
Twitter, Freedom Ride blog, my columns in blackagendareport.com every week, patreon.com/Margaret Kimberley, my book, Prejudential, you can get on Amazon. If you have Amazon issues, and that's fine, you can get it straight from the publisher, Steerforth Press. That's steerforth.com.
Thank you so much, Margaret. It was awesome to talk to you. I've been wanting to have you for a long time. Thanks so much for being here. Everybody listening, you know the drill. Thank you. It's good to be back. Had a nice little break from the longer streams, but it's good to be back. And in the meantime, you know the drill. Lucy says meow. I say peace. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same channel, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Till then, Lucy says meow. I say peace. Peace.
Peace.